Imagine this. You're standing in a crowded room. There's noise, voices, laughter, movement. But inside you feel hollow, numb yet anxious, surrounded yet unseen. You laugh at the right moments. You nod when you're supposed to. You do what's expected of you. And yet somewhere in the depths of your mind, something whispers, "This isn't who you are." The whisper gets louder at night, when it's just you and the silence. No distractions, no obligations, just the truth you keep avoiding. And here's the brutal paradox. The more you give, the more empty you feel. The more you try to be everything for everyone, the less of yourself you recognize in the mirror. Why does life feel like a performance? Why do you feel so tired? Emotionally? Spiritually, even if you haven't done anything wrong? Why do your relationships feel like negotiations instead of connections? And when did simply being yourself start to feel like a rebellion? Here's the truth no one tells you. You are giving too much of the wrong things. Not money, not time, not effort, but your energy, your attention, your identity, your freedom, your peace. And you're giving them to the wrong people, the wrong systems, the wrong battles. The result? Quiet despair. A life that looks fine on the outside, but feels like slow suffocation from within. You might not even realize it yet, but you've been trained to betray yourself. Not with grand decisions, but with small, daily surrenders. A smile when you want to scream. An apology when you've done nothing wrong. A yes when your soul was begging for a no. What if I told you that stopping just 5 things could fundamentally shift the way you live, think, and feel? And what if the reason you haven't done it yet is because you've been conditioned by society, by family, by fear, to believe that stopping these things would make you selfish, cold, or rebellious? But maybe rebellion is exactly what your soul needs. Let's go deeper, much deeper. Because this isn't about self-help platitudes. This isn't a 5 quick tips kind of talk. This is about unraveling the psychological traps that keep you bound to people-pleasing, to emotional exhaustion, to invisible chains you didn't even know you were wearing. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." So ask yourself this: what if your suffering isn't just a personal failure, but a symptom of misplaced loyalty? Loyalty to people who drain you. Loyalty to ideals that don't fit you. Loyalty to a version of yourself you outgrew years ago. What if the real problem isn't that you aren't enough, but that you keep giving away your essence to things that never deserved it? We are taught to believe that giving is noble, that sacrifice is holy, that love means tolerating anything, that to belong you must bend. But maybe, just maybe, some things were never meant to be given in the first place. And once you stop handing them over, that's when everything changes. Not instantly, not dramatically, but quietly, powerfully, permanently. This isn't about becoming selfish, it's about becoming sovereign. So, if you're ready to explore the 5 things you must stop giving, if you want to reclaim your life, your energy, your identity, then keep going. Because what comes next might feel like the emotional equivalent of setting fire to your old prison cell and finally walking free. Let's begin. Number 1. Stop giving your energy to people who feed on it. Not everyone in your life is there to love you. Some are there to drain you. They don't arrive with red flags or warning labels. In fact, many come cloaked in warmth, humor, even charm. They say the right things, but they pull from your emotional well like it's infinite, never stopping to ask if you're okay, if you're tired, if you're breaking inside. And the strange part? You keep giving because it feels like your duty, because you've been told that kindness is always the right answer, because you're afraid that if you stop, they'll leave. And worse, you'll be seen as the bad person. But kindness without boundaries becomes self-betrayal. It's not about cutting people off at the first sign of friction, it's about recognizing patterns. Do they only call when they need something? Do you feel worse after spending time with them? Do they ignore your boundaries and rewrite your reality when it suits them? There are people who don't want your healing. They want your helplessness. Because when you are small, tired, and confused, you're easier to control. So here's the truth. You are not responsible for saving people who refuse to save themselves. You are not selfish for walking away from emotional vampires, and you are allowed to protect. Your energy, like your life, depends on it, because it does. Number 2. Stop giving your time to what starves your soul. Your time is not just a calendar entry. It's your life force. Every yes you give is a small death to every other possibility. Think about how you spend your hours, mindlessly scrolling through curated lives, hoping to escape your own. Sitting in conversations where your truth is a burden. Working jobs that numb your spirit for the promise of a weekend. That's over in a blink. How much of your time is spent surviving rather than living? You tell yourself it's just temporary, but temporary becomes a lifestyle. One day becomes a year, a decade, a life you didn't choose but settled into. We're taught to hustle, to grind, to stay busy. But no one asks, for what? Success at the cost of sanity is bankruptcy. Being admired by strangers while disconnected from yourself is not success. It's self-abandonment in disguise. The question isn't, how can I get more done? The real question is, what am I doing that deserves my time at all? Because when you start removing what doesn't feed your soul, you make room for what nourishes it. Stillness, creation, purpose, love. Number 3. Stop giving explanations to those who don't want to understand you. There's a special kind of exhaustion that comes from constantly justifying your existence, your dreams, your boundaries, your identity, your pain. You explain because you think they'll understand you better. But some people don't want to understand. They want you to stay predictable, small, and agreeable. You'll find yourself over-explaining simple things like why you need space, why you said no, why you're changing, and yet they don't hear you. Not really, because the moment you stop fitting into the version of you they're comfortable with, they resist, they challenge, they guilt trip. But here's what you need to realize. You don't owe your truth to those who only want to rewrite it. Explaining is different from sharing. When you share, it's an offering. When you explain to someone who refuses to listen, it's an erosion. Let your choices speak. Let your presence change. Let your life evolve. You don't need permission to be who you've become. Sometimes silence is the loudest statement. Number 4. Stop giving your power away through self-doubt. Self-doubt doesn't scream, it whispers. It says, maybe you're not ready. Maybe you're not good enough. Maybe you should wait. And every time you listen, you shrink. You pass on opportunities. You stay silent in moments that matter. You let others speak for you, decide for you, live for you. Where did the doubt come from? It wasn't born in you. It was taught. By a world that profits off your insecurity. By experiences that punished your confidence. By people who were threatened by your light. So they convinced you to dim it. But here's the philosophical twist. You've always had the power. Your doubt is just a shadow of your unclaimed strength. Friedrich Nietzsche once said, "No one can build you the bridge on which you, and only you, must cross the river of life." The question is, will you build the bridge or wait for permission? You cannot become who you were meant to be if you constantly question whether you deserve to begin. Confidence is not the absence of fear. It's the presence of decision in spite of it. Number 5. Stop giving attention to what you can't control. This might be the hardest and the most liberating. You've been taught to hyper-monitor everything. Your image, your future, what people say about you, how strangers react to your words. You become a curator of perceptions, not a participant in your own life. The news cycle spins chaos into your mind. Social media fuels endless comparisons. Worry becomes your default emotion. But here's a deeper truth. Worry is worship for the things that enslave you. You think control gives you safety, but the chase for control often leaves you more anxious, more reactive, more hollow. Let go, not in a passive way, but in a powerful, conscious surrender. Let go of needing them to approve. Let go of trying to fix what's not yours. Let go of the illusion that anxiety equals preparedness. Viktor Frankl, a man who survived the Holocaust, said, "When we are no longer able to change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves. Shift your focus. Return your energy to what you can change. Your reactions, your thoughts, your choices. You'll find a strange, beautiful freedom there. These are the 5 things you must stop giving. And when you do, you'll begin to feel something strange. Peace, clarity, power. But we're not done yet. You now know what to stop giving. Next, we explore why you were giving them in the first place. Because beneath these habits lie deeply rooted forces. Psychological, philosophical, and existential. That must be faced. If you're still with me, now's the moment. Subscribe if you haven't already, because the next part is where we break the cycle from the inside out. Excellent. Now we move into part 3. The hidden problem. Its psychological, philosophical roots, where we uncover why you've been giving so much of yourself away. This is where the emotional depth intensifies, and we explore the roots of the issue from the inside out. Why do you give away your energy, time, truth, power, and peace? Why do you stretch yourself thin to be accepted, to be liked, to be enough? Why do you say yes when your entire being is screaming no? The answer is buried deep, not in your schedule, not in your personality, but in your wounds. You see, the world doesn't just shape who you are, it shapes what you believe you have to be in order to survive. From childhood, you were trained, not maliciously, not always intentionally, but systematically. You learned to prioritize other people's needs over your own. You learn to fear rejection more than dishonesty. You learn to equate self-worth with sacrifice. This is not just psychology, it's programming. Carl Jung spoke often about the shadow, the hidden part of ourselves we deny, suppress, or ignore. And one of the deepest shadows most people carry is this: the belief that love must be earned through suffering. So you perform, you over-explain, you tolerate, you suppress, because somewhere in your subconscious mind, a script is running. If I disappoint them, they'll leave. If I say no, I'll be abandoned. If I stop giving, I'll stop being loved. But here's the secret your programming doesn't want you to realize. Love that must be purchased with your pain is not love at all. It's emotional capitalism, a transactional version of connection that leaves your soul bankrupt. Now let's zoom out. This conditioning isn't just personal, it's cultural. We live in a world that profits from your doubt, your distraction, your disconnection from self. Aldous Huxley warned of this in Brave New World. A future not ruled by fear, but by sedation. A society where people willingly trade freedom for comfort, truth for pleasure, and authenticity for acceptance. And it's happening now. Look around. Advertisements tell you you're not enough, but could be if you buy the right thing. Social media teaches you to measure your worth in likes and validation. Work culture glamorizes burnout and busyness as badges of honor. Schools reward compliance, not curiosity. You were never asked, "Who are you?" You were asked, "What will you do to fit in?" Jean-Paul Sartre said, "Hell is other people." But that's not quite right. Hell is the version of yourself you become just to be tolerated by other people. And over time, that version becomes so deeply ingrained. You start forgetting who you were before the world told you who to be. That's not just sad, it's tragic. But here's where it gets even darker. The more you live according to this conditioning, the more you internalize it. What began as survival becomes identity. You start to believe, I'm just a people pleaser. I'm naturally anxious. I'm not cut out for confrontation. I guess I'm just someone who gives too much. No, those aren't your traits. They're your traumas in disguise. And until you confront the system that taught you to betray yourself, you'll keep calling your coping mechanisms personality. Arthur Schopenhauer once wrote, "Every man takes the limits of his own field of vision for the limits of the world." So ask yourself, what if your entire life has been lived inside a cage you couldn't see? A cage built from polite expectations, invisible contracts, and silent desperation. A cage you decorated nicely, made comfortable, even defended when others questioned it. But a cage nonetheless. Here's the psychological twist. You've confused peace with people-pleasing. You've confused love with losing yourself. You've confused control with coping. You think you're being good, but you're actually being small. And smallness is not humility. It's fear masquerading as virtue. Even Viktor Frankl, who survived the greatest horrors of human suffering, said, "When a person can't find a deep sense of meaning, they distract themselves with pleasure. So you scroll, you binge, you shop, you overwork. Not because you're lazy, but because you're lost. Because you've been so conditioned to give yourself away that you don't know what it means to live for yourself anymore." But now the cracks are showing. You're tired, not from doing too much, but from doing too much of what doesn't matter. You're numb, not because you don't care, but because you've cared too much in the wrong direction. And deep down, beneath all the noise, one question is rising like a scream. Who am I? If I stopped giving away the parts of me I never had to sacrifice in the first place? That question is terrifying, because it threatens everything you've built, your relationships, your image, your routines. But it also promises something else, freedom, not the kind that looks like rebellion, but the kind that feels like returning to yourself, your real self, the one you buried beneath all the people-pleasing, self-doubt, and control. And that journey is only just beginning, because now that you see the roots, next we reveal the damage they've done. What happens when you keep giving and giving and giving until there's nothing left? That's where we're going next. The unseen consequences. You didn't notice it at first. The damage was subtle. It didn't announce itself with catastrophe or collapse. It came like erosion, slow, silent, relentless. A missed opportunity here, a swallowed truth there, a relationship that drained you but you kept because it's better than being alone. And then one day, you look in the mirror and don't recognize the person staring back. Not because they've changed, but because you've disappeared. This is the first unseen consequence, the death of identity. When you keep giving what was never meant to be given, your boundaries, your power, your peace, you begin to dissolve. Not physically, existentially, you become a reflection of what others expect, a walking resume of roles and responsibilities. You play the part so well, You forget there was ever a self beneath the performance. And here's the sinister truth. The world rewards that performance. You'll get praise, promotions, likes, approval. But deep down, you'll feel like an actor in someone else's play, clapping for your own imprisonment. Let's go deeper. This doesn't just hurt your soul. It rewires your brain. Yes, neurologically, your brain adapts to what you focus on. So when you spend years prioritizing external validation, people-pleasing, and control, your neural pathways reinforce that behavior. It becomes second nature, automatic, a default setting you can't find the off switch for. That's why you say yes when you mean no before you've even processed what just happened. It's why you ruminate over that one comment from a stranger while ignoring 10 loving messages from people who truly care. It's not weakness, it's conditioning, hardwired into your nervous system through repetition, reward, and trauma. But there's more. This pattern of overgiving doesn't just hurt you, it teaches others how to treat you. You think you're being helpful. They think you're a resource. You think you're being kind. They think your time and energy are for sale. Because when you don't protect your boundaries, others assume they're not real. And over time, people stop asking if you're okay, because you've trained them to believe you always are. This is the second consequence, the collapse of authentic connection. You end up surrounded by people who like the version of you that's useful, not the version that's real. And the real you start hiding them, not out of shame, but out of fear. You fear that if people saw who you really are, the messy, tired, honest version of you, they would leave. But what you don't realize is, you're already alone. Because being unseen while surrounded by people is the loneliest kind of loneliness. This is how lives unravel, quietly, not from huge dramatic events, but from chronic disconnection from truth. And the society you live in? It counts on this disconnection, because when you don't know who you are, you're easy to market to, easy to control, easy to keep compliant. When you doubt yourself, you buy more. When you're anxious, you scroll more. When you feel powerless, you follow the loudest voice, whether or not it's wise. You become a consumer of life, not a creator of it. This is the third consequence, the hijacking of autonomy. What does that mean? It means you're no longer living from the inside out. You're reacting, not choosing. You're managing impressions, not creating impact. You're coping, not living. You wake up tired. You reach for your phone before your thoughts. You let the world tell you what to feel, want, and fear. And you wonder, why am I so exhausted? You're exhausted because you've been at war with yourself. You don't need more caffeine. You need a revolution of self-loyalty. And yet, there's something even more haunting. When you live like this long enough, your soul stops screaming. It goes silent. Because after years of being ignored, suppressed, explained away, it gives up. That's the final consequence, the quiet death of desire. You stop dreaming, stop creating, stop risking. You tell yourself, this is just adulthood. No, this is not adulthood. This is emotional resignation masquerading as maturity. True adulthood is not about settling, it's about sovereignty, living with agency, choosing your values, protecting your spirit. But the longer you live in the trance of giving everything away, the harder it becomes to remember what it even felt like to live for yourself. And here's the most devastating part. No one will save you. Not because people are cruel, but because they're watching the same performance you've been trained to give. They can't see the war behind your smile. They don't hear the scream behind your silence. Because you've made your suffering palatable, even beautiful. But your soul knows the truth. And now that you've seen the consequences, you can't unsee them. Which leads us to the final moment, the revelation. What happens when you stop giving these 5 things? What's left? What rises in the silence where people-pleasing used to live? The answer will shake you, because what comes next is not comfort. It's clarity. It's a truth so raw it might feel like loss at first. But stay with it, because what feels like dying is actually being born. What happens when you stop giving your energy to those who drain you? When you reclaim your time from what numbs your spirit? When you stop explaining yourself to the deaf, doubting your power and worshiping control? At first, something terrifying happens. You lose everything that wasn't real. The relationships built on convenience or control begin to crumble. The roles you were never meant to play become unbearable. The distractions that used to sedate you lose their taste. The routines that once felt normal begin to feel like cages. And in that void, you feel lost, raw, exposed. Because for the first time in your life, there is no script to follow, no mask to wear, no audience to impress, no authority outside of your own breath, your own knowing. This, right here, is the moment most people run. Back to the noise, back to the patterns, back to the false safety of self-betrayal. But if you stay, if you hold your ground in that sacred silence, something extraordinary begins to rise. Not fast, not loud, but undeniably real. You, not the version they praised, not the version you performed, but the original, unedited, eternal self, the one that was never broken, only buried. And here is the final, most powerful truth. You never had to give those 5 things away. You were trained to, conditioned by systems that feared your power, raised in families that confused obedience with love, enculturated into roles that demanded you shrink to be safe. But love does not require sacrifice of self. Peace is not earned through perfection, and freedom was never something the world could give you, because it was yours all along. The lie was that you had to earn what was already yours. Do you see it now? You are not a victim of life. You are the author of it, and the pen was always in your hand, even when you wrote chapters in someone else's language, even when you lived scenes directed by fear, even when the plot felt like punishment. You can still turn the page. You can still change the tone, the setting, the entire arc of your story. But you have to do something radical. You have to stop giving away what is sacred. And here's where the paradox sharpens its edge. When you stop giving everything, you don't become less generous. You become more true. When you say no more often, your yes becomes pure. When you choose stillness over chaos, your life becomes a prayer, not a performance. Imagine living a life where you wake up and belong to yourself. You walk into rooms and no longer shrink. You make choices from clarity, not guilt. You speak not to convince, but to connect. You rest without apology. You dream without fear. You exist without needing to prove your worth. That life is not a fantasy. It is not reserved for the healed, the rich, or the chosen. It's yours. It always was. But you must choose it, not once, but every day. In the quiet moments when fear says, "Give more," and your soul whispers, "No, keep this one for yourself." In the conversations where you feel the urge to explain, and you resist. In the moments of doubt, when you remind yourself, this is power. This is the bridge I'm building, one boundary at a time. And perhaps the most haunting truth is this. Every time you gave something away that was sacred, you were unconsciously asking for love. And that love, true, unconditional, steady, will never ask you to sacrifice yourself to receive it. Real love will see you and say, "Come as you are, not as you've been trained to be." But first, you must say that to yourself. You must meet your reflection in the mirror, tired, scarred, imperfect, and say, "I see you. I won't abandon you again." Because the world cannot love a self you've buried. It can only reflect what you are willing to reveal. And once you've returned to yourself, fully, fiercely, without apology, the world will begin to reorganize around that truth. People will leave. Let them. Roles will dissolve. Grieve them. New doors will appear. Walk through them. Because once you stop giving away what you never needed to sacrifice, you create space for the sacred exchange. Not depletion, but devotion. Not performance, but presence. Not survival, but sovereignty. And this is the life you were always meant to live. A life shaped not by what you gave away, but by what you chose to keep. So ask yourself now, in the stillness of this moment, what will I no longer give? And who do I become when I finally keep what is mine? Answer that, not with words, but with the way you live.